Hey, welcome back to another lick of the week. We've been talking about some Scruggs low position feel and soloing ideas. Of course, when you learn a lick, especially in Scruggs style, sometimes it's a standalone lick that you can use in solos and as improvisation in your breaks, and it can also be filler. But since we've been talking about low position, I thought we would go ahead and discuss vamping. Vamping is a common technique in traditional Scruggs style that's kind of fallen by the wayside for a lot of more modern players. And again, this is just my observation of banjo playing, but a lot of low position backup now tends to revolve around rolling ideas, and you don't hear vamping being favored as much because bands design their backup to be a certain flavor and a certain design that maybe wasn't featured as much back in the day of traditional banjo. Rolling backup has its place, of course, but vamping, I think, is also pretty much overlooked these days, and it's a technique that many younger banjo players are not very adept at or don't find the need to learn much about because, as I said, it's not played much, but it's a valuable technique that you can decide to add to your arsenal of backup techniques. And it can start simply and get pretty complex, so it's not something you can just kind of stick your nose up at and say, that's easy, because some vamp patterns rhythmically get pretty complex. Let's start with the premise of a basic vamp. In acoustic music, since we don't have drums to help carry the beat, we have the bass player, which typically plays downbeat notes, and then one of the other instruments, say the banjo vamps, the mandolin chops, the fiddle player chunks on the fiddle, dobro players can do rhythmic things. Every instrument can help the bass carry the beat because we know the beat has two basic parts, down and up. And so the vamps on the banjo help to carry opposite the bass just as the mandolin player does. So at some point in a traditional bluegrass setting, especially years ago before rolling backup became the thing to do, players would have to alternate between themselves playing backup, and they may have to alternate playing rhythm sometimes, which means playing vamps or chops. So let's start with just a basic vamping pattern. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to approach this. I'm going to start my metronome at about 70 beats a minute, since we're talking about vamps. And again, the metronome here is counting in 4/4 time, or cut time if you want to change the value. But we're going to let each click represent a beat. 1 and, 2 and, 3 and. So that's down, up, down, up, down, up. So if you're patting your foot with this, the clicks represent the down beats or the bass notes, and the spaces in between the clicks are the off beats. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Now if this is too fast, you can change your metronome setting at home to a slower speed. I'm going to start with the number 1 formation, what some people call the F formation for G major. This is my first shape for G major. And I'm going to play one note on the downbeat. The 4th string with my thumb is going to play every downbeat note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So all the downbeats will be covered with my thumb, and this is going to help you to visualize and to hear exactly where these offbeats occur. And the offbeats are going to happen when I pinch 1, 2, and 3 together. So to me, this is a very basic vamp that shows you both parts of the beat. And it allows you to play an effective vamp pattern. So I'm going to have my number 1 G shape here. And I'm going to try to get in sync with this metronome. Excuse my voice, I'm fighting a cold. And I'm going to play downbeat notes with my thumb on the 4th string, and then pinch strings 1, 2, and 3 on the offbeats. Ready? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, now that's one approach, and it's pretty valuable to me. I teach my students this beginning vamp to give them an indication exactly how the beat functions, so that they can play both halves. Now you may decide that you don't want to play the downbeats. Well, then you can just pinch some strings and eliminate all the downbeat notes. So I'm going to start this thing up again at 70 or so beats a minute. And now I'm not going to play the 4th string with my thumb. I'm going to pinch 1, 2, and 3 only on the offbeats. So you'll hear chop, 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 or vamp. So I'm going to do pinches with no downbeat notes. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Excuse me. So I guess there's no set in stone way to play backup. If you're playing with a group, obviously, then the group may arrange the song in such a way that they want you to play certain kind of ideas behind certain verses, behind other instruments. So you can kind of make an arrangement of a song as far as your backup goes, and you can predetermine and practice where you're going to play things. But if you're playing, say, in a jam session or a version of a song that has no real arrangement and it's being arranged as you go, then you have to listen to what the other instruments are playing and what you think fits in that situation. So it's a good idea to have more than one way to play a vamp so that you're not always locked in the same scenario, which would get boring and may not fit musically. So you need to be able to adapt as you go. So that's two basic approaches to vamping. Now that is just, again, this would be considered 8-note vamps if I play 2 ideas per beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And so what I would be considered 8th-note vamps. If you only play on the offbeats, you're only playing 1 idea per beat. Obviously it's every offbeat, but still only 1 sound is emitted from the banjo, so these would be quarter note ideas. And there's a lot of variation for vamps as far as tone goes. The same rule applies for your right hand when you're vamping as it does when you're playing licks and rolls. You can play rolls close to the bridge. You like that Ralph Stanley sound. You can play away from the bridge. And there's a lot of variation in tone between X and Y. Well, the same thing happens with vamps. You can make vamps really percussive, and you can make vamps kind of mellow by changing X and Y. So there's a lot of variety in between those two positions for you to mess around with. And you may notice I'm doing something with my left hand, which is just a bouncing technique. If you continue to hold a chord the whole time you vamp, even if you decide to play 8th note vamp patterns, thumb pinch, or the offbeat patterns as quarter notes, you're going to get a lot of excess sustain. And of course the banjo is known for not having a lot of sustain. But even the small amount of sustain that the banjo has can be kind of disconcerting or distracting in the background. So what a lot of Scruggs players do is adopt this bouncing motion. They'll only hold each string that they play for a split second, and then they release the pressure of the left hand. So that every time you hear a note, cuts off. Note, end of sustain. So you get this real concise staccato kind of sound where you just play the notes you want to play, which is really helpful when you're playing with a bass player or playing with other instruments trying to carry the rhythm section, because we need the rhythm to be really precise. We don't want any big drawn out, typically, like, we don't like long drawn out bass notes on the bass. You typically don't hear bass players play one long note that lasts for a whole measure. They tend to want to keep things like a clock. They tend to favor quarter notes for traditional, 4/4 bluegrass tunes. So you want your rhythm to be precise so that you don't bleed over into the next bass note. So bass, vamp, bass, vamp. Even if you decide to play 16th note rhythm, the 4th string is played with the bass, and then the chops will be heard in between the bass notes. Even if you decide to play 8th note or quarter note rhythm, it doesn't really matter. You need to practice bouncing and making those notes precise so that you don't have a lot of over-ring of the banjo. So I think in the next few videos we'll try to work on some of these basic Scruggs backup ideas. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I appreciate it. We'll see you next week.